3, 4, 5, plus Mark is 6 at the meeting so far when we're trying to reach Isaiah. Hopefully we call back. So let's stand to do the pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll call everyone's present except Commissioner Larry, and we do expect him by phone. We just tried to reach him. So first agenda item, we accept and approve the reading of the minutes for the waiver from last meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Terry. Chair stands Sally. Commissioner seconds that move. Any debate on the matter? If not, all in favor? Roll call. Motion carried. Whoops. Oop, aye, and motion opposed. Motion passes 6-0. Review and approval of all bills, part-time deputies payroll.
I move to approve payroll manual warrants 2046 and 2047, and corrections warrants, GL manual warrants 3021J to 2102J and 1113J.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the review and approval of all bills, part-time deputies payroll. Any discussion on this? Hearing none. All those in favor? Please raise your hand or say aye. Motion carries unanimous. Reports, proceeding under reports. Report from MCCA.
Was not able to attend the meeting, but my understanding is they are exploring options for a lobbyist firm to represent MCCA in the Maine State Legislature.
Sounds good. And Charlie Prey is no longer with them.
He's retired or moved on to something else.
Okay, very good. Item B, Central Western Maine Workforce Board.
The Workforce Board is continuing to expand its reach and assist displaced Mainers through employment referral and through its newly established membership in the National Association of Workforce Boards and the retraining of all members for the benefit of our own constituents in Androscoggin County as well as all of Western Maine. So that's very good news.
Wow. Chair thanks the gentlelady. Madam Treasurer is present.
So these are the reports for the end of second quarter. It's a little late news. We didn't have a meeting last time. And you'll get July.
Oh, yes, yeah, I'll put
so
you
I'm
on
not going to
speaker.
spend a lot of time on it.
And we welcome Commissioner Larry, who's with us now via cell phone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're doing the Treasurer's report right now, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Continue,
So-
please. I apologize.
So just real quick, all departments are within budget, including the jail. The lines that are individual lines that are over are highlighted in the report. And cash flow, we borrowed at that time for $4 million from the TAM. But since we have got the jail money, some of it. So our cash flow is looking good as far as where we are with the TAM. We'll have enough to go here. So. I was not sleeping for a while. I'm doing okay now. But that's really all to report. And this one.
Thank you. Any questions for the Treasurer? Commissioner Larry, any questions for the Treasurer?
I can't hear really very well, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Very well. No further questions. We move acceptance of the Treasurer's report.
I so move. Okay.
Moved and
Seconded.
seconded. I'll second that. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
6 in favor so far, and Commissioner Larry?
I'll abstain. I just can't hear real well, that's all.
We understand, thank you. So 6 in favor and 1 abstention. We're proceeding under section 7, open comments from the public. Any comments from the public? Looks like I skipped the administrative report. So something coming up from my childhood, so I apologize.
Just very briefly, just a few things I'll just mention. Have been obviously working on budget. The jail preliminary numbers, we're getting less money from the state this year. We're still gonna have to go back and ask for supplemental. That was going to be a significant amount. However, we did have some savings from last year, so we're able to plug that number with those savings, and we'll ask for supplemental, which is just a little bit more than we did last year, so we should be okay. But that was a dicey week of, because we didn't discover what the state's going to potentially give until just a week or so. We finally hired a deputy director for EMA. We finally found a candidate that we're very pleased with. He has been on one of our volunteer boards for some time. We looked and debated whether to hold off, but of course that's paid half by the state. And quite frankly, our director has been, during this time, has been overdoing it. And so this is going to lessen that burden. The COPS grant has been totally approved by the feds and activated. So we're all set to go with that. And I think the ads are going out fairly shortly to get somebody.
Great. And is the hiring done now for the assistant emergency preparedness? You've hired someone now?
Yes,
Bring him or her and say hi sometime.
we will do that. Probably when Angela comes in 2 weeks for her
Be great.
budget.
Good. Now we'll entertain comments from the public, if any. Hearing none. Proceed with new business, audit presentation.
I will introduce Ron Smith and Karen.
Well, don't be shy.
They are with our firm, RHR Smith Company, and have been doing our audits for a number of years. And I will start it off.
Good afternoon. I'm Ron Smith. This is Karen.
Great.
We live and breathe the world of government. I believe we do 10 counties in the state of Maine and Maine's jail authority. So we know a lot about who you are and what you are. I probably would say the best way to start before we've scaled down our presentation. I think Clarice gave it. We didn't want to go through 90 pages. I'm sure you got a long agenda unless you want to do the US talk. But I figured I'd go back the last time I was in this room was about post Board of Corrections, like abolition, as I remember. And at that same time, you guys were going through your software conversion to Munis as well. And Bob was actually your treasurer at that time. So, and a lot's happened since then. A lot of that institutional knowledge has gone out the door. I think that there were some concerns from this board and some of the staff about the timeliness of audits, but I want to assure you we were always on board. And I think as Clarice knows, we were virtually a crutch for Androscoggin County during that Munis conversion when the institutional knowledge left the building because you had Linda retire, Deb retired, I think, within the past year. And obviously with the passing of Bob, there was a lot of work and certainly some things, quite frankly, I think as Clarice has got in here and got her feet wet for the past few years and said, maybe there's some better ways to do that. We certainly, I think, have been very progressive and very proactive in working with her and trying to get there. And I actually think that the County of Androscoggin now is pointed in the right direction to where Clarice is understanding and making that hers and coming up with the best practices from sitting in the chair. So I thought I'd go back there, and start with that first. And there's been a lot of work in progress. I hope that everybody at this table will acknowledge and recognize. And to the point this year, we were starting to talk about many of the best practice issues of Androscoggin County that we're kind of end the presentation. But going over financially, on December 31st, 2009, I believe we actually walked out here the day before this madness hit to come back that next week. And unfortunately that delayed some of this fun, you know, in getting to this room, you know, but I actually think, you know, as far as the conversations, the work that's got done and the product here and the best practices and discussions that we've had all year long, you know, I think they really indicate the fact that we're able to start concentrating on details now, you know, as opposed to just numbers and reconciliations and things like that. But simply said, I think that the county, you know, of Androscoggin is in average financial shape, I would say, would probably be the way that I would look at it. I can remember the day when this county financially was below average, like you had no money, you know. So those days, you know, certainly you're above those days to the point where you have some, and to the point where you've actually put some away for calculated purposes like capital reserves. And I think you got on December 31st over $500,000, you know, set aside for capital expansion here and building reserve. Your undesignated fund balance was about $900,000 on December 31st, 19. Last year was about $1 million. Don't be alarmed. You planned for it to go down. It didn't actually go down as much as you thought, you know, that it would. Where should it be? County government is one of the governments that's actually statutorily capped on what they can keep. And to let you know what the rule is on that, 20% of your tax assessment is allowed to keep in unassigned fund balances. And then there's a protocol of about 4 things, you know, after that number is math, where you can restore your contingency account. You can use it to, I believe the next thing that you have to do is property tax relief. And it starts getting into capital reserve, you know, and things like that. And really, you know, the moral of the story is when it starts getting into the 3rd and 4th piece of the statute where it tells you how to set that money aside, those are all budgeting mechanisms. And I think that those are very important things to focus on when you're having your capital plan and how much money you're going to set aside there, you know, for future expansion growth. The actual the capital laws for county governments are virtually similar, mirror image to the municipal capital laws on how you get money in there and how you spend it. But unfortunately, municipalities, and we do like 140 in the state, they're not capped in what they can keep, but county governments and schools are. So, and when you think about how you're capped with 20% based on the tax assessment, that's not really the good math on what you should keep. It should be based on what you spend, you know, and especially when, I don't recall how many years ago, but it birthed the Board of Corrections when they came out with the tax cap for jails, you know, in the state, because they saw the cost of jails just escalating. The municipalities all rallied, you know, went to Maine Municipal Association, got together with the Maine County Municipal Association. That birthed the tax cap in the state of Maine for, you know, for jails. And I'd say probably about 8 to 9 years ago, you know, is when that got birthed. The tax cap still exists. You go back to somewhere around, and I think it's when you guys were doing your software conversion, about 4-ish years ago, 5-ish maybe, when the conversation started. They basically waived, they didn't waive the tax cap, but they waived the math. And what they now said is, we know that the costs are going up for jails. We can't, you know, we can't stop that, but we also can't tie your hands anymore. So what they did is they added a provision in the tax cap where I believe, based upon the consumer price index for inflation, and for 4%, whichever is less, and I'm just going to use 4% of a guideline. You know, 4%, you're allowed to go up based on that math 4 or 5 years ago and add to that every year. And that's virtually your circuit breaker for your jail. So you've got a cap in what so where am I going? You got a cap in what you can keep for money, and you got a cap on what you can charge to run your jail, is the best way I can say it. You know, and we make sure through this process that you haven't exceeded any of those values. And we can just say 20% of about $10 million-ish, which is what your tax assessment is, that's $2 million. You're at $900,000, you know, that's not committed to anything. So you're well below your statutory cap on what you can keep for unassigned fund balance account. Your jail, all your money for your jail, is basically rolled forward to be used for the jail. One could argue that, whether or not that was to be added to that number to come up with the math for your jail tax cap or for your county, whatever you can keep. Regardless, you're still under that circuit breaker for both the jail and for the county. And that $572,000, it's always been the position of this county. That money stays jail, and is used to offset the cost of jail operations going forward. So when the Board of Corrections got dissolved, I would argue a lot of the policing and the regulation went away with it, but the tax cap didn't go away. And my advice to all of our counties, including the jail authority, where Saginaw and Lincoln, share that jail, is you really need to know what it's going to cost you to run that jail. I think the tax cap was necessary. One, because LD1 was implemented years ago, and this really kind of piggybacked off that. But you ought to know what it's going to cost you to run the biggest department that you got here at the county, Androscoggin. So I think good business says whatever it's going to run, whatever we get, that we're able to set aside for taxes, to run that facility, whatever the rest of the math is. I think by the way you've got this thing set up and the way the Board of Corrections kind of birthed these jail independent businesses, let me tell you, they're not money makers for sure. They can certainly involve a lot of resources for you, but to keep it in one column and keep it out of all the other, county departments there, I really think is the cleanest way to do it. We've actually seen some counties start rolling their jail funds back into general government with that tax cap, but still try to maintain the integrity, of the jail. One of the big reasons why is the jail funds are on a fiscal year ending on June 30th. We got a lot of counties that end on December 31st. So it's a nightmare. Oh, you end on December 31st. It's a nightmare, really, to put that budget together when you think you've got to take 6 months of one period, 6 months of another period, and really kind of marry it together to get to this product. And it's no easy chore, which I would argue is similarity when your jail administrator and sheriff put their budget together. They've got to do the same thing for a budget, except that they're looking at a different fiscal year than yours. So that math really is important when you're trying to put those two things together. But overall, financially on December 31st, 19, I think that the county is in average financial shape. Certainly some of the best shape that we've seen you guys in, over the course of time, because I can remember the days when Androscoggin County didn't have any. So yeah, simply said, I'd say that. I say some of the things that you want to start looking at. Many things are statutorily set for fees. I'd say one of the things that we're seeing the counties looking at now is the deeds, which is another large department that you run here, and what you're charging for fees, for your deeds, for the cost of the services that you're providing. Because a lot of counties are trying to treat that as a separate business as well, like the jail. And they're doing this, and I can tell you at least 2 counties are actually doing fee studies right now for deeds. And I think that that's important, because why? The more you can use to charge the general public for the cost of that service, the less you're going to have to raise through property taxation to fund the cost of your deeds and other departments too. And again, some of those fees are statutorily set, but there's many that aren't, and I think that those are the areas that one advice I can give you, as a sounding board, because again, we got at least 2 counties looking into that right now, and just actually 2 committees, that got set up to look exactly at the fee structure, because they want to be able to look their constituents in the face and say, we're doing everything that we can to reduce your tax burden and trying to place the cost of the service with the people that are actually using the service. So anyway, there's some food for thought there, and what's going on out there in the county world. I wish I could tell you what COVID is going to mean to county government. I don't think anybody knows. I think your EMA department certainly has probably been one of the more active departments, probably, as well as any other county, with working with the municipalities in the state for this emergency preparedness because of this pandemic. We're seeing money coming in relief. We've seen a lot of promises from EMA, and I understand they're starting to get out on their tour. I don't know whether Androscoggin County is on their list of visits, but I know that many of the municipalities and a lot of the counties are getting visits as we speak, so that they can start requesting drawdowns under some of this emergency COVID money, that exists in the state. But I think that a lot of people were concerned about people coming in, you know, to the register of deeds and whether it be property tax transfers and some of those fees drying up. We're not seeing. We have seen zero decline in our counties and any of real estate transfers and that. If anything, we're hearing there's some booms in a few certain counties and some of the bigger populated ones. So we haven't seen any decline in that area, which I would argue probably that deeds next to property taxation itself is your largest revenue generator at this county. So that was a concern by a lot of counties, I think 3 or 4 months ago, to where we had some counties go out and get super RANs and super TANs, you know, anticipation because they thought they were going to run out of money. You know, they didn't know where they were going to end up on December 31st. But here's what I'm sure of: neither does the federal government, neither does the state of Maine. And I think that this ugliness is going to rear its head for a very long time. I think it's going to be in 2021 before there's any resemblance of any guidance on how this is going to work, you know, and really what kind of relief you're going to see, you know, but I think you're going to see a lot of relief. I think that, you know, once they can pass a stimulus package 3, 4, and 5, I think that's something certainly they're going to start putting that money and getting it down to local governments, which we're starting to see the movement to now. So I'd say there, you know, would be the summary of kind of where you're at, what we see going on in the world out there. And yeah, this is the best way, because I'm more than happy to answer any financial questions that you all have. As far as, you know, some of the best practice issues, you know, there were some struggles 3 and 4 years ago with this merger with bank reconciliations. You guys came up with a very strange process on how to marry your jail and how to marry your county. And let me tell you that posed some huge fundamental accounting challenges, to say the least. I think we've worked through those. I think we continue to work through those. I think we can sit here in confidence tell you these are good numbers. I think 4 years ago, there was a struggle on the math and a struggle on the numbers, but no more, you know, and I think that you worked hard to do them, hard to get there. As far as other things, in no particular order, over in the jail, we worked with the inmate benefit account, and Karen can correct me. Karen, the one that does all the work, she said I had to do all the talking. But we worked with the inmate benefit account. As I recall, any inmates that were discharged from their civil penalties when they were released from the jail, there's a process with inmate benefit cards. You would actually give them a preloaded debit card, as I recall, and that process wasn't working at all. You know, to the point where you actually had and maintained some of these preloaded debit cards because of the challenges of when the prisoners got released or when the prisoners got picked up. We've talked with Clarice, we've talked with your jail administrator. I can assure you that they have worked on a better process to put in place for that reason, you know, to try to not make this an accounting and an administrative nightmare to do that. So we've offered some suggestions, and, you know, and I know that they've worked on a new process. There was one of our new audit programs. We're working heavily in one of the big risk areas of any audit, and that's payroll and benefits. One of the comments that we made this year is when we were doing our testing, there was a couple of transactions we pulled reimbursements to former employees who were receiving, based on a collective bargaining agreement, what we would call other post-employment benefit, you know, that wasn't retirement related, could have been insurance related, etc. So, and as far as the taxability and the reporting purposes, we passed that on to Clarice, and I think they were going to run that ladder up and run it up the ladder of the attorney and legal counsel. From what we can see, there should be some tax, you know, there should be at least some kind of a tax piece of paper given to them that says, hey, you received this money from Androscoggin County, you know, and please check with your tax advisor on to determine any taxability of this matter. And I don't know, Clarice, have you had any discussion back with the attorney on that? Yeah.
I'm talking to Larry about it because it involves an attorney.
Yeah.
So I can't
Yeah.
answer that.
Gotcha. So any other best practices that I missed on?
Policies and procedures that are being approved. That wasn't in the management letter, but.
Yeah.
Just
More,
recent.
more formalizing and putting a written place, a document that you can actually go to, you know, to see who does what and how they do it is the best way we can say it. So, and I think that would be what we could say a best practice, and especially, and that really kind of reared its head because of all the institutional knowledge that you lost over the county, you know, for the past 3 years. That's just something for anybody that steps in that door for a good reference tool to have. So. Anything else that I would have missed, Clarice, in that management letter? As far as kind of a depiction on where we were 3 or 4 years ago and where we are now, you and Larry, anything you want to add to the conversation?
Cleaned up a lot of stuff. I mean, I think I started the audit for 18. I did 18, you know, 18 and then 19 and then there are 3 audits that I've
You're gonna do the jail next week?
yes, sir, not next week, but yes, sir, I am
Okay.
doing the job.
Keep her there for a while. Too, would you?
They might keep me there.
You did have a commission. Clarice posed a question to us on restitution. I think there was a question that ultimately ended up about restitution. You know, the county of Androscoggin, restitution is one of the most convoluted processes in the state of Maine, to the point where they were actually forming a committee with the DA's Association. And myself and a gentleman from Cumberland County who was supposed to be representatives pre-COVID, you know, obviously never happened. But software was a big conversation piece, and there's a software that they used out there called Justware, as I recall. And now they're moving away from Justware and going to go to a Tyler product, you know, and you guys have Munis, which is your software. But there were huge challenges to keep track of restitution. It was almost unfair. It still puts a huge administrative burden, you know, on each respective county, especially when you have, whether they be the victims or the actual people themselves that are paying the restitution, the movement of them moving across counties or back into your counties. Ultimately, if it resides in your county, whether it's on the receiving or giving end, your district attorney is responsible for that. And I'm sure if you talk to your district attorney, it's probably at the bottom, you know, one of his least favorite things to do. You know, top of one of his least favorite things to do, certainly with restitution. And he's not alone, it's all counties. It's a process that really needs to be looked at, you know, by the state. You know, and I know, like I say, pre-COVID, there's been some movement on there. I really don't have an update for you now, but I understand there's still some conversation about moving ahead and full steam ahead with Tyler and their product to revamp the software and how all basically the court system talks to each other in the state. But there's some struggles here, I would say. Certainly, we've had some conversations with your district attorney, you know, but bottom line is, at the end of the day, you know, there's $2 million worth of restitution-ish, you know, that's still outstanding or being collected or trying to be kept, or outstanding judgments, you know, against that court orders that your district attorney is responsible for. That's a lot of money. So I think that you guys probably annually move over $300,000 through restitution. So, yeah. And so one would say, well, we got $2 million worth of court orders. Yep. And they go back 6-7 years. Some of these court orders could be for life, you know, for some of these judgments. And that responsibility is placed on the DA and at the county level. I think it's unfair. I think that you don't have the resources to deal with it. I know it's a big bone of contention, you know, to the point where in the past 5 years, there's been 2 embezzlements, you know, large embezzlements with restitution, you know, so it's a sore area, you know, for district attorneys and counties. And I don't think Androscoggin is any different, but I would argue you probably got the second largest restitution account in the state of Maine. So you put a lot of stuff through this county for sure. So.
Just to be clear, though, the embezzlements weren't other.
I don't want to fake that. I don't want to fake that. But and I'll tell you, the software movement, getting away from, you know, not the just, you can't blame something on whether it be software, the process, but the perfect storm just allowed people that have been doing restitution for a long time to take advantage of the system is the best way I can say it. And we were actually involved in both of those restitution cases. So, and it wasn't fun, you know, and those cases went on for 2 and 3 years, you know, before there was any final judgment. But as you asked, Commissioner, you were not one of the counties respected.
I mean, there have been a lot of changes, and I think we're very fortunate that you have been a constant. Probably your reports have doubled in the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So we would love to see that paper go down. We're big, huge fans of not killing trees. So we like to do it in PDFs, but I'll tell you, these things aren't getting any user friendly to read, you know, for sure. You know, and I think Mark was on the telephone. I'm sure he can attest to that too, you know, but putting a set of government financial statements together is one thing. trying to read them with is another. And as I always tell people, it's just the opposite. When you come to this, start from the back and read to the front, because that's the easiest way to read these things. But at the end of the day, when you read, I don't think there's anything that jumps right out at me that says there's any financial conditions for the county to be aware of. I think it's just going to be focusing on your craft, you know, and best practices with the chairs, you know, that are focusing on it. So.
Further questions for Mr. Smith or Karen?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Larry has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if Commissioner Haynes, if you'd be willing to hold the phone up to the microphone just so it can be heard. But, are there any concerns that you have, sir? I apologize, I couldn't hear real well. I could hear a decent bit of the conversation or parts of the conversation, but are there any red flags you see on how things are being done, or any ways we can improve, or any things that give you any grave concern about how things are being done? I just want to make sure that we don't have anything we need to be aware of that we need to be looking at as commissioners.
I think over the past, as I said, over the past 3 or 4 years ago, when you were going through your software conversion, and then they took a very unique approach on how they really kind of set the jail up. There was a lot of accounting struggles to the point where, you know, as far as the cash in your bank, whether it was jail or county, there would have been some struggles to get the math to you. You know that, right? There's been a huge improvement over those years to, you know, to the point where, you know, I think that you've taken that as an area of struggle and turning it into an area of strength, because cash is king and it really helps all of your departments. I think that, you know, any concerns that I would look at, I think you're light in capital. I think that you don't have enough money to take care of your infrastructure here in Androscoggin County. I don't think that is, you know, an unknown, whether it be in county government or state government. You're light though. I mean, I would argue that you're probably the second, maybe the third largest county in the state of Maine. You're about York. We can get into like valuation wise and budgets, you know, but you're a big county, you know, and you got a lot of infrastructure here in this county. Whenever you have a jail, that's an expensive endeavor to keep track of. I'd argue if there's one area that I would say that, you know, needs to pay attention and certainly needs a plan is your infrastructure and some type of a capital plan for sure. And you're not the only county in that boat. You know, I think it's going to be hard to keep up with it, but absent of a plan, you know, I think it's going to be impossible. So, so that jail's not getting any older, you know, that's sitting, they're getting any younger, that's sitting out there, and they don't cost less to take care of anymore. They still cost more. That'd be another area that I would focus on too. But I think now, you know, over the past year and a half, we've been able to work with Clarice and get into that jail with some of their inmate accounts and how they do business, the registry of deeds, the register of probate. You've got a lot of separate independent businesses that get run here, you know, at the county, deeds being one of them, probate. Those are the areas that we focus on, you know, now, and just make sure that there's these red flags that they're at least discussed, you know, but I'll tell you, I don't think there's a lot of capacity that you have. It's nothing against the capacity to go out and tell you what it would take to like fight all these red flags and try to mitigate them. You wouldn't have enough capacity or money to go around in your budget to do it. So what do? We put the best firewalls in place with what you've got to work with. So, and if there was anything that we saw where we like, hey, this is pressing, you really need to address this now, and it may cost some money, those are things that you would be hearing about from us. But nothing comes to my head.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions?
My name's Commissioner Madore, and I just want to thank you for joining us today. Your presentation has been very helpful so far. One of the things that was in your management letter that I'm not sure if I've heard you mention yet was about the civil process accounts receivable. You mentioned that there were some monies that maybe we were owed that have been sitting, you know, unpaid for a while, and about sort of reconciling that. I was curious if you'd mentioned that.
So there is an accounts receivable on the balance sheet for civil. So I did some testing of that accounts receivable, and there are some receivables on there for years and years and years. So we sat down with Clarice and with the sheriff. Unfortunately, the civil person was on vacation, I think, but there is a plan for them to look at that, because there are services that are still being provided to the same people who owed 5 years ago. Don't owe, you know, owe some current, owe some 10 years ago, but maybe nothing in the middle. So as a way to possibly get that cleaned up, but we did put an allowance in there for some uncollectibles, but that is one of the issues that they are currently working on together.
Do you recall how much money we're talking? I imagine it's probably in here somewhere. Just tens of thousands or less than 10.
If we don't have that today, we can get back to you.
I'm just
I think it was
ballpark is curious.
I can tell you it was more than 10,000.
$26,000.
Now you had mentioned that's sufficient. Thank you.
Okay.
But you had mentioned the software for the district attorney's office. Now, in your management letter, the last thing was the software. Were there other departments using different software for their accounting?
The sheriff's department uses different. The jail uses QuickBooks. The DA uses QuickBooks. They also use Justware for restitution.
Civil has their own.
You got about 5 different softwares.
Civil
here.
has their own. There's in Munis, we kind of talked about this as well. Not sure how it gets implemented, but Munis has a cash receipt system. The sheriff's office takes in money, the deeds takes in money, probate takes in money, the DA's office takes in money, EMA takes in money, but everybody has their own receiving process. So how to streamline that for better.
And these,
financial
and a lot of
statements.
these officials, your registrars, they're a DA, they're responsible for those pools of money. So that automatically, I would argue by statute, makes them business managers, for lack of a better word. The good thing is a lot of these elected officials don't want to be business managers. They want to turn that responsibility over to the treasurer's department, who clearly has a say as the Board of Commissioners oversight too. So where am I going with that? I know that one of the things that drove the decision to go with Munis is that eventually you would do away with 4 or 5 other softwares, and eventually consolidate that with your Tyler software with a lot of restrictions. So I know that was the goal 4 years ago when you went into that movement. Unfortunately, that institutional knowledge, you're looking at it right now, that institutional knowledge was gone, but I know that was the goal, was to try to streamline a lot of this software and these financial processes where it would run through this treasurer's office. I still think I would probably hold off on that. There's still some things that we want to work out internally in that treasurer's office, but at some point in time, I think that still needs to be the goal for the County of Androscoggin, is you're not going to get to one. The DA's office, through Tyler, now you got at least a Tyler product that's complementary to your system, but you've got some softwares out there that are going to be just necessary by EMA, because they're state mandated. You've got a software, the CRAS system, that you've actually got to report to, the Board of Corrections. There's so many softwares that we could get into. And I don't think they'll all be eliminated, but anything that's got to do with cash receipting and how you do business, I think that would be the goal, to streamline that. Inmate benefit account money over there when you intake a prisoner. So again, we know what's out there, and I think that the goal was to try to shrink some of that software down, as you moved into this Tyler platform. But I think you're still a little ways away from that, but I still think that needs to be your goal. So.
To piggyback on Commissioner Medora's question, the civil process, I'm looking back at the 2016 report, and it looked like we were about, quick math in my head, about 18,000.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is this is an ongoing problem, not a increasing problem. An ongoing problem, obviously, it needs to get solved. But
And I think it's more of just a verification, and enforcement, of what's owed out there. Problem. Money's still owed. We can go back and we can tell you who owes you. So can your sheriff and administrator. So collect it, is really what we're saying, as opposed to having us put an allowance, in your account that says, hey, we're basically going to concede half of this money. So I don't think anybody wants to run a business like that. $10,000 is $10,000, especially in that area.
Yeah.
So.
I know there was some discussion a few years ago, before Karen got here, about going back and writing some of that off that we knew we weren't going to, probably wouldn't be able to collect, and somehow the translation got missed between our people and their people, and so that didn't happen. But the bottom line is that as Clarice, and we're dealing with making sure that as of now, we're not adding to that, and we're going to deal with the previous. My solution is really simple. They don't pay, we don't serve.
I'm with you.
The policy, I think, has been to wait until the case was over and collect the money, but you're still providing a service.
Yeah.
A year later, and you're using your officers.
Your resources.
So we've been working on that, and Clarice is stepping up and having conversations with Leo to correct that.
Commissioner Madore.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned also in your management report about posting the revenue budget into the financial software. Could you speak to that? I'm curious if this is a one-time thing when we have the budget approved and the maintenance of that, or how that works, and if it sounds like what you're saying is that other counties also do that, and so I'm just curious in what the benefit of that would be.
Historically, the practice has been to post the expense budget and not always the revenue budget, but we like to have a balanced budget. We want your revenues to equal your expenses so that you can see the monies that are coming in and where you could be with your revenue, if you as well as where you are with your expenses.
And we'll just keep running with the jail. A lot of counties will actually set up a separate, I think that might have been the intention and thought years ago, where they would set up a budget. Because when we look at, we got to talk, remember, we're talking two budgets. We're talking a calendar year budget for you and then a fiscal year budget for the jail.
Correct.
You won't go find the resemblance of that anywhere, out there. You're going to find a lot of math internally that's used to keep that. And a lot of, I won't say a lot, I can think of maybe 2 counties that we do that actually spend a lot of time, money, and resources in trying to keep the integrity of those 2 numbers different and both of those budgets posted. And I'll tell you, it's not an easy chore to do it. And I would argue that was also, something that we discussed, for lack of a better way to say it, with that comment as well.
Now, does it does seem like, from my perspective, because, it's rather limited, but it does seem like we have had conversations in the past about where we are in the year in terms of our income from the revenues. And so I'm curious if there seems like maybe there's a relationship between that and the other department's software, or is maybe that's all done sort of outside of the software and that sort of thing, maybe a little more department specific.
Well, I'd say it's a buffet of everything, but I'm going to run with like the jail. That's the obvious one. When you look at that jail, you've got a budget for your calendar year, and a budget for your calendar year for basically, here's the best way to say it, the jail and everything else. You have it. The everything else is fine because that's all based on the calendar year, but the jail's not. So there can be some overlap. There can be some timing differences. There can be some differences in how the Board of Correction pays you, and what year they pay you. And that's a big difference, especially when you're putting a budget together and not having any reports in front of me that you get put in front of you, whether they're for the county or the jail. Here's what I'm sure of. Where your money's coming from and where it's going. But to literally on any given day, because you've got all these separate businesses running out there for whether it be the DA, the jail, some fiduciary responsibilities that these people all have because of their statutory capacity. You don't have a software that tells you where all that money is and when it's all coming through the door. Those are things that you've got to go look for and ask for. And I think that we've been able in the past year and a half to focus more time and efforts on those, than probably any other time in the past. But it's a process. Remember, they have some statutory rights too on what they can collect and how they can collect it, so that's a huge challenge. But I don't recall any issues with your district attorney in the conversations, that we've had in any of that. Matter of fact, I remember a lot of positive conversations with your district attorney, just the same, your sheriff, conversations with them. There's a lot of separate businesses out there, a lot of software. And I think that, ultimately at the end of the day, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it comes through the county of Androscoggin. But, you know, to say what time of the day it comes through, there's a little work that you guys, I think, need to do on that. And I think, again, that was part of the movement on swapping softwares and trying to centralize everything. But there's no way you're going to be able to do it just because of the way counties are set up in the state of Maine. So it'd be difficult.
That having been said, on any given day, I can call Clarice and ask her how much money
Yep.
we've collected, and 10 minutes later, I've got an answer.
Yep.
So, you know,
But to take a piggyback on that, it's not going to be easy for police to call your district attorney, your deeds, your sheriff, your jail administrator, say, hey, how much inmate money did you collect? How much cantina money did we get today? You know, how much did you get for a grant that may have come into the office for the district attorney? They handle grants too. And the timing of all this doesn't necessarily run through your treasurer's office. It's running through the independent statutory positions that exist out there. And that's a challenge in county government everywhere in the state. I could tell you stories, so.
Are there any instances that you can recall, whether not in Androscoggin, but in other counties, where they have been able to successfully meld all departments together so that, you know, that information flows?
No, simple no.
Because
Easy, easy and simple no I've said forever. So,
So
not everything's on site.
So can I go back to Commissioner Medora's question? Was you asking about the budget posting? Is that what, on the,
That's what the comment.
Yeah, about the posting of
of the
the
budget?
revenues.
Of the budget?
Yeah.
So that was kind of that was kind of a miscommunication between me and the department heads, because they always put their expenses. I assume that they posted their revenues as well. This is the budget, not actuals.
Not the
Not
actual
the
activity,
actual.
just the budget.
So that's, it was missing in when I ran the reports for them, it was missing. However, when I give the reports to you, you know, the spreadsheet I give you, I take that right from the budget. So I compare the budget to the actual on those sheets. And so I didn't notice that it was missing because I go right from the budget that was passed and not what's in the system necessarily. So you've been getting the information, it's just been on that spreadsheet. So I just wanted to clarify that.
and just like I say, the software, just because of those challenges and again, just adding the whole jail element, it's brutal. Brutal.
Any more? Commissioner Medora?
Just one more question.
And then Mark Roy has one.
But let Mark Roy go ahead.
Mark, you're on.
Ron, overall, how many adjusting journal entries were proposed? Not for the government-wide stuff, but just for the general fund and other fund accounting?
I'll tell you, Mark, there were a few, you know, because we had to pick up and clean up some stuff early on in the year, you know, for some of the jail. But I would say, Mark, there were a few that we did. You guys did the majority of them. I can assure you of that. Is that a fair statement? So yeah, Mark, you know, so what we did, not sure, but here's what I can tell you, way less, Mark, than we did the first, prior 2 and 3 years. And that's why I'm proud of Clarice. You guys are heading in the right direction, Mark.
So I can answer that, Mark. They
And
were,
that's what I'm kind of driving at. I want to make sure that, you know, Ron and I both know that, you know, small and medium-sized governments don't have the best accounting. And I just want to make sure that, you know, Clarice is on the right track in terms of maintaining those books in accordance with GASB.
so Mark, there were 8 journal entries, but they were divided up by one side of the entry was general fund and the other side was special revenue. So I call it 4 entries, but they call it 8.
They had 2 legs to it because they cross funds, Mark.
All those were different.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, Mark, but Clarice was able to do a lot. That's where the progress has been made, Mark. Instead of us helping out with journal entries, Clarice has been able to step forward, certainly, and do a lot of that stuff. And that's why I say there's been a lot of progress that's been made.
Okay.
I'm not sure I would have said that 3 years ago, Mark. I'm sure I wouldn't have. So.
I've only been here 2, just saying.
As long as there's a continual improvement, that's all.
Yeah.
All we can ask for.
Commissioner Madore, anybody?
That was my question.
That was, you asked Commissioner Madore's question. Any further questions?
I will just follow up and with a statement that Clarice has been a godsend to this county and has done some terrific things, continues to do so. One of the problems that she and I had a conversation when she first arrived was when they came in and set up the Tyler program. There was some glitches in it, some things that perhaps needs to be changed, re-put into the, as the program needs to be updated. We continue to have that discussion, although many of those things she has been able to do on her own without having them to come in and redo the program. The other thing that I will say is, Ron says we are in average financial shape for counties, and I will make the statement that average financial shape is not good enough.
Right. Very good. Thank you, Auditor Smith and Karen.
Pleasure.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. And listen, anytime you guys have any questions, they know where to find us. Just funnel them through them.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Fellas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys and gals. Next item under new business is a submittal of a bylaws amendment. This is by me, and as I understand it, we present it today, and then we vote on it twice, 2 more meetings, before it becomes part of the bylaws if it passes. And I consider this mostly housekeeping. The first one puts I guess except maybe for the first one. The first one puts a term limit on the chair of 1 consecutive year. But other places in the bylaws allow for that to be overridden by 5 votes. So it's more like a statement that in a small deliberative body like this, I think the 3 people that have been chair, and there's 4 others that would make a perfectly fine chair. So with the exception of maybe some future board that where nobody wants to be chair, probably a 1-year term is fine. But if for some reason the board feels strongly of some other reason, or they can't find someone that wants to be the chair, they can, there's another section in the bylaws, so you can override the suspended rules for the bylaws for that meeting, which would be a meeting that the vote was taking place by 5 votes. So kind of like declares the policy. It's not so tough that you can't change it, but 1 year, that chair can sit out and come back in the year after that and keep playing musical chairs. And then also just basic understanding of the policy on electing a chair or doing other things with the chair. I just wrote that it's understood according to deliberative body customs that the chair serves at the pleasure of the board. The chair may be overruled on any matter by 4 board members. The chair may be removed or replaced at any time by a vote of 4 members. That's just basic deliberative body protocol, as I understand it. I remember 1 year there was a speaker in the main house who had asked the court about that. He thought maybe he needed to be removed by a 2/3 vote. The court said no. The speaker serves at the pleasure of the house. I think in Reed's rules it even says that. I'm not sure about Robert's rules. And then the other one was addresses agenda items in addition to the current policy of having the administrator and the chair set the agenda. If for any reason the board, 4 board members want an item on the agenda, then they can vote it, let's say this meeting, put some item on the agenda in the future, even if the chair didn't want that. That's consistent with the idea of the chair serving at the pleasure of the board. So those are just some, I think, fairly minor things that I thought we'd discuss next meeting and vote on. Any questions on that now? Okay, so I guess
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Larry.
I'll wait. I think somebody else is going to speak. I'll wait.
No, I think it's just you.
So is this open for discussion?
Hold on. Yeah, we are in discussion. Please continue, Commissioner Larry.
Okay, thank you. So does this mean that any chair will only serve for one year term in the sense of they cannot be reelected for a second term?
What it boils down to is they can't be reelected for a second term unless they elected by 5 votes. It also sets the idea that unless there's some extenuating circumstances or a strong feeling about from the board that the chairs would be for 1 year. So the typical term is 1 year. It can be overruled. The bylaws can be suspended by 5 votes, and therefore you could elect the chair for another year in a row. And also the chair can, based on this language, sit out a term and come back and be elected by 4 votes, for instance.
Could I ask, I understand the value of term limits and, support that idea. I guess my question is, I'm not certain about whether we really could sufficiently suspend the rules, because I feel like that's only suspending them for 1 meeting. And I'm not trying to be, disagreeable, just I think that that would be for the purpose of suspending the rules for 1 meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It would almost seem to me that we would need to suspend the rules for each meeting if we were going to continue to allow a chair to be elected by those 5 votes, or we'd have to jump through some sort of hoops of going through a bylaw change. I guess I would maybe suggest we go to 2 consecutive 1-year terms, so that there will be motivation for the chair to perform, being polite and respectful to the commission, and at the same time, it would give motivation, in the sense of being able to re-elect it, but you don't have somebody stuck there for 4 years.
I understand your point about the suspension of rules being just for the meeting where the motion is made. And it's just a technicality. If the motion is being made to elect the chair and you suspend the rules, I would think that would be sufficient. But if the board decides it wants to go with a 1-year limit, then we can add 1 more line that says that the bylaws can be suspended regarding the length of chairs by a vote of 5. So we can language that any way we want to make it work. So the debate next meeting would be about, do we like the idea of a term limit? Should it be 1 year? Should it be 2 years? That kind of thing. And we can also amend the exact language we'd use based on what we want at that time as well, and be within the requirements of public notice and such for bylaw changes.
Okay. So just for clarification, if we were to amend it to 2 years, we need to submit that documentation next time, do 2 more readings after that, submit that amendment to this amendment here. Just to clarify that.
I'm not sure. I think an item can be amended once you get the process in, unless it's so ungermane to the original discussion. It should be valid. Yeah.
Would the chair accept the friendly amendment of 2 consecutive 1-year terms? Because we do have the mechanism to remove a chair.
It would be a 2. Yeah, that's 2. You have elections every year anyway. Why don't we bring that as an amendment at the first reading, and then we'll debate 1 year and 2 year, or whatever else anyone wants to debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good. Anything else? Comments? Discussion?
Probably best that Commissioner Larry probably can't hear me particularly well, but I just wanted to say he is spot on with 2 of the things he said. One, we can't really suspend the rules to elect someone and then, continue to have that person be the chair if we have the bylaws say one thing. That wouldn't really work. And the second thing is if the bylaws say we have to, be reviewing it twice, we can't be changing it midway through. So it has to be reviewed twice in the state that it is going to be when we pass it. We can't be changing it midway through. So if this is going to be number 1, then we would have had to have it say 2 consecutive 1-year terms. And I think that is important, and that's how it works with ordinances, passing ordinances, anything like that. That's the standard and way it is. If it's modified, then it doesn't count anymore. You have to start back over again.
Well, let me ask, if we amend it next meeting, then that's 1 reading as amended, and then we come back and have a second reading. Doesn't that qualify as the 2 readings in its entity? in its entirety?
I don't think so, no. If we change it now,
Two after that.
Okay, so we have to debate the matter now then, really.
yeah, and furthermore, while I'm, on it, I could talk a lot about term limits, and I do think they have serious issues and really actually damage the democracy in itself. And I know, face value, they seem like a great idea, but beyond even talking about the merit of term limits, I don't really see that there's a problem. I haven't ever seen any municipal board or the county, have a problem with incumbency when it goes to the chair. I think having a qualified chair is very important, especially when you have a board of 7 and, you may get people who aren't particularly versed at it, or maybe they're new. So having an experienced chair, I think, is very important. And I wouldn't want it for this, sort of arbitrary rule to get in the way of that. So I'm kind of the feeling is, if it's not broken, don't fix it, because this hasn't really been broken. And whatever happened to elections, if we're going to be electing that, it almost, I think, to some extent, delegitimizes the election, because why can't we have the will to choose who we want to be, whether it's the same person twice, or 3 times, or 4 times, or 8 times? But if we choose the person, then the election, it should, it's a valid way to select someone, and it shouldn't be someone. I don't think someone should be barred just because they've done it before. We want qualified people, right? We want qualified people to be running the meetings and setting the agenda. We want qualified people to be working with the administrator. So, I think that's really important. But beyond that, part of why term limits were invented is the power of incumbency. We don't have a power of incumbency here. They don't have the bully pulpit. They don't have money being used to help their campaign from the government. That is what the power of incumbency is. We don't really have that. The chair is the chair of the Androscoggin County Commission, and it's worth as much as the words in itself. So I don't see that there's like a problem to unseat someone. If there was a problem, like we had someone who can't be unseated, that makes sense, but that's not, we don't have that. So if it's not broken, we shouldn't be fixing it. So I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense to me. But on the other end, the second piece to this, if we're going to say replace at any time by a vote of 4 members, the rule needs to say how, right? It needs to say how, like if they're going to be replaced, is that a choice of who they're going to be, or is it going to go back to the secret ballot, election process? It really needs to be specific about how they're going to be replaced. I think that's very important. So I don't know. I feel like what we should be talking about is probably like the jail or capital improvement plan or the building that I've been trying to talk about.
The chair objects to the gentleman's remarks. We are discussing this matter right now. Your opinion of what we should be discussing instead of this can be said separately at other times, but what is before us now is this issue.
Sure, but what I'm saying is that it just doesn't seem relevant to right now. But anyway, I hope you guys can understand what I'm saying is
Sure.
the election of chair is important, and we don't want to delegitimize it. We want qualified people. So since in incumbency, this all-powerful chair, incumbency chair has never happened in the history of probably Androscoggin County, I don't see why we'd be wasting our time changing it. We're going to be talking about the budget soon. Going to be some important discussions. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. This board had pretty serious problems in recent history that we've heard about from the folks who've been here for a while, with attorneys running the entire board and all sorts of things. Because there may not be any problems now, and the chair was not suggesting there are any problems with the current board, the chair is trying to think down the road. I spoke with a former state senator from Washington State, who do a lot of work out there, and she's on the county commission out there, one of the county commissions. And they do have problems, same number of commissioners that have here. The chair and a couple of cronies run the whole show. You can't get the votes to change anything. So just because that's not happening here, it doesn't mean that at a future board, that couldn't happen, where you have a powerful chair being held in place by 4 votes, and a term limit would require that at least a 5th vote be required for that powerful future possible commissioner to continue. That's the intent. All this really does, if you think about it, it says that in order for a chairman to continue for a second term, he or she needs 5 votes. That's all this really says. Yeah, that's all it says.
That's not what it says.
Well, it doesn't say it, or we'll make it say it, but the intent of this is to say that the rule can be suspended, or we can put it right in here that it takes 5 votes to have a chair continue for a second term. Commissioner.
So if what your suggestion is that we want a chair to and need 5 votes to be elected, then why don't we do that instead of limiting it to 1 term? I don't really see that. And also,
We could do that.
we're not, if that's your goal, then maybe that should be what we should do then, and not set it to one
No,
year
here's why.
term, right?
Here's one. If you have 7 people, you may only be able to get 4 votes to elect a chair. If you say it's 5 votes to begin with, that may throw you into some kind of chaos. Right now, if you don't have 5 votes to continue a particular chair, a new person can be elected by 4 votes, a majority plus 1. That's how the continuity happens. So there is a difference that is made there, but only if there's a chair that there's some struggle to remove the chair. I think someone else stepping down, especially on a board like this, where there are 7 members that are perfectly capable of running a meeting, would be certainly non-problematic.
Just one last thing. You mentioned problems of Androscoggin County's past, but never was that tied to a chair being an incumbent. None of that was. So, but if, whatever the the will of the board is here, but in the end, if we want to have someone, if we want to have some sort of chair game where we just keep switching chair and have people who may not be qualified and push out someone who wants to do it and who we want to do it, then I guess that's the direction we might go. But it just doesn't really make sense to me. I haven't seen any other legislative body, municipal or county, in the state with a rule like this, because it just doesn't make sense. It like encourages finding someone who's not very good at it is what it seems like to me. But I mean, we haven't had this problem.
If the chair, after being chairperson for a year, can't get 5 votes to continue, then probably it's a good idea that chair yield and allow someone else to take over. And then perhaps at the end of that year, if that chair wishes, they could get 5 votes to continue, which would therefore probably be an improvement politically, at least. It may not be provable on paper anywhere else. But I'm not attached to that. It's not a big deal. So it's not going to make any difference in this board, I don't think. So I'm willing to, it depends on what anybody else thinks about it. I mean, I'm sort of a believer in term limits. But if anyone else wants to weigh in, then we can maybe keep that in there. Otherwise, I'm happy to withdraw the term limit part of it.
Would you?
I need to get this thought. I don't know. Sitting here,
Yeah.
listening to debate exactly what I think yet. I need to, think about it and, perhaps weigh in next meeting. I don't.
Well, we could have 2 proposals put in for next meeting, so we could be within the notification agenda today, and then be able to have 2 readings in the future. So we could leave that in and pull it out, I guess. Commissioner? Oh, we could also amend it, I suppose.
Thank you. Yeah. Whether we vote, I think it would be really unwise for us to approve it as is, whether you agree with the term limit thing or not, simply because of not the specificity of the replacement of the chair. I think that is exceedingly important that it be specified in here about what that means, because I don't know what that means. I think we should specify that, and it will be important, because if it ever comes up and it's contentious, it should be spelled out, absolutely.
We can easily spell this out. This is how it would work. Let's just say today that the board wanted to remove the chair. You take a vote. If you have 4 votes, the chair is removed. And then at that point, there is no chair. Therefore, the next vote would be to nominate someone to be chair, and then you create a new chair. And that goes for the legislature or the U.S. Congress, which reads laws. The Speaker of the House from Maine wrote many of those years ago. But 4 votes removes the chair, and 4 votes puts a new one in.
Could
There
you,
should be no problems that come out of that, or gridlock or something.
could you explain the second one some more? How does what you've bolded and underlined, how is that different than what it is now?
Which, is that number 2, the
Yes.
agenda items?
Yes.
Right now, it reads that the chair, in conjunction with the administrator, shall put items on the agenda. Then, if you would like to talk about unspecificity, it says that the chair shall not or should not withhold items being put on the agenda unreasonably, but unreasonably is up for debate. That can go on for weeks and months. So I think that certainly if 4 people, a majority of a body, want an item on the agenda, at the very least, we should be able to put that on. Some body should be able to put that on. I don't think it's a major change, but it just makes it clear that the chair and the administrator come up with the agenda, but also if for some reason there's some disagreement, that the board itself can vote for, make 4 votes at this meeting, and next meeting there'll be something on the agenda.
I get no problem with that. I do think that in terms of, just the order of things, that we should vote on these separately, just because they're separate topics and they're separate changes to the bylaws. But I have no problem with that statement.
Okay, so for next meeting, reading number 1, we'll have we'll have the term limit proposal in as it sits now, and there'll be another order without the term limits at all. So we can vote no term limits for a year, unless someone has another variation that they want to include as an option to vote on next meeting. And then we'll, chair says at the pleasure of the board says it all. Chair may be overruled says it all. The chair may be removed or replaced at any time by a vote of 4 members. I don't think that needs to be changed. It makes it quite clear. The chair serves at the pleasure of the board, can be removed at any time by 4 members. And of course, a new chair can be elected by 4 members, unless you think we need to put that in to make it clear. Question, Madhu? All right. So we'll have the term limits on the agenda next week and an option to have no term limits. We'll vote on that separately as one proposal. Then we'll have the understanding of the chair being serving at the pleasure of the board. And then thirdly, we'll have that any agenda item can be placed on the next meeting by a vote of 4 or more, added to probably that existing paragraph. Let's get us postured, enough so we can debate this. Any further discussion?
I really love number 2, and you're absolutely right. Unreasonable is different to everybody. So I think number 2 is a great suggestion,
Yeah.
and I'm all for that. The first one, I guess even when I read it earlier, when the agenda first came out, if the chair serves at the pleasure of the board, let it be at the pleasure of the board. So if the pleasure of the board is to vote somebody, if we have a chair that's got an organized mind and controls the meeting well, and that's the pleasure of the board, let it be the pleasure of the board. So but everything below that, I have no problem with as far as removing, I would think if you can get 4 people to vote a chair out, they ought to resign before they get a chance to get voted out.
Right.
But, I guess I do have a problem with saying, we have a built-in term limit. We can only serve so many terms and we're done running. And so, and you'd probably be hard to find somebody that would want to take on chair for 8 years, wears you out a little bit. And so,
I'm
but it-
fine with trying that. Commissioner Terry kind of wanted.
I mean, I don't feel strongly about it. I'm not quite sure. If it's at the pleasure of the board, let it be at the pleasure of the
Mhm.
board.
What do you think, Commissioner?
You know, I hate to put a limit on, you know, an individual, you know, if they're doing a fine job as chair, you know, echoing what Commissioner Madore said, you know, if you have someone who's doing a good job, you know, why prevent them from continuing to do a good job if that's their desire to continue doing it? So that's my only reservation. I do understand your, you know, desire and, you know, in this amendment.
I just wouldn't pull that out, quite frankly. Terminal part. Unless you really want to pursue it. Still got to think about it. I think Commissioner Kelly's still in the middle of it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, hold on. We'll get to it real quick.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it would behoove us, it would be in our best interest to encourage someone who, you know, is in place and is doing a, you know, a great job. And, you know, if they're, you know, if they have, you know, the greater good in their, you know, in the forefront of their mind, you know, that we should keep them in there. We do have a mechanism in place to remove them if that's not the case. But if someone is in place and, you know, they're in place at the pleasure of the board, and they're doing a fabulous job, then, you know, why bring that to a close because, you know, they've served 1 year.
Okay. She'd be fine with trying that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Commissioner Roy. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Larry.
I'd like to hear what the other commissioners have to say first, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
You'd like to what?
I'd like to hear what Commissioner Roy and Commissioner Ames have to say first.
Well, I don't know if they want to speak.
I'm fine.
Commissioner Roy and Ames have been invited to speak if you want. Commissioner Larry.
I don't need the, go ahead, Mark.
I don't feel strongly either way. I see the benefits of moving the chair around. I actually see a benefit in giving somebody that has no experience as a chair the opportunity to act as a chair, as opposed to always just saying, okay, well, you know, I have the most experience. If somebody wants to have the chair, hey, let them have the chair. But I don't feel strongly either way.
Commissioner Roy reflected some of my thoughts on the matter as well. Commissioner Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I understand, and there's some interesting thoughts from the different commissioners, and they are informative. I think there's still value in having some sort of term limit to the chairmanship, just because it does allow some new leadership to get the chance. Otherwise, some newer people will be hesitant to try for that role. And I feel it gives people more opportunities, even if maybe they're not outspoken. I feel that does put some safeties in. There's a reason we have term limits for our elections. And I feel that this also just helps to make sure that we don't have a dynasty, so to speak, set up where we have a chair for 4 years or 8 years. For whatever reason, you mentioned out west, you know, some of the troubles there, you know, and I hope that would not, you know, occur here. But this is how we prevent something like that from being able to continue if it did take root. So that I feel there is some value in making sure that there is some sort of, I feel it'd be better to, you know, perhaps consider 2, you know, consecutive 1-year terms. So if there is a good chair, they're rewarded for that behavior, not by just not getting voted off during their term, but given the chance for a second year's term, but still having the limits of Commissioner Michael's proposal, maybe just with a little bit looser diameter of control, but allowing the chair to be removed or overruled if necessary.
So,
I think it has
So did you want to see a proposal for 2-year term limits, 2 one-year terms?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would love to see that. I
All
feel
right.
like that would help reward people. Yeah,
All
I
right.
don't think I could support anything farther than 2, but I think this has a value.
Okay, we'll have it on the agenda then 1-year limit, 2-year limit, and no limit. So we all have a full choice. We can debate it next time and decide where we want to go. Think about it for the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Okay, so it'll remain essentially the same, except the term limit will be put out as no term limit. Term limit will be stricken, and one proposal for next meeting, so consideration, a 1-year term limit and a 2-year term limit, subject to overruling by 5 votes. Okay.
You're saying the chair may be overruled on a matter of.
No, that's, I think, already in the bylaws. I'm just saying if, whether we pick no term limits and it's moved, we pick 1 year, the chair would step down unless the board votes by 5 or more to continue with the chair. Same with the 2-year limit. That way, the board's hands aren't tied entirely. Like I say, there may be a future board, unlike this one where no one wants to serve or people are shy or whatever. That way, the simple, slight, 1 more vote is needed for the chair to continue. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. You done with that? Thank you very much. I apologize for the length of time we took up on that. We'll discuss it a little bit next week. And hopefully think it over a little bit before we get there. And we're now at the new business C administrator's contract.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to enter into an executive session to discuss the administrator's contract.
It's been moved by Commissioner Larry to move into an executive session. Could the gentleman defer that motion till we get a little information from the administrator
I
and the details?
have just passed out a changed request.
Oh,
Which essentially is for 1 year instead of 3.
I'll read this for the two commissioners on the phone. The administrator just handed out an extension, amendment, I guess, or change. Whereas the county employee desirous of extending the employment agreement of 2015, an amendment of 2018. Attached here too, the parties agree as follows. 1, extension of agreement. The agreement and amendment, which has a termination date of October 19, 2020, shall be extended for 1 year, terminating on October 19, 2021. Compensation. Employee shall receive the following salary as full compensation for his services. Commencing on January 1st, 2021, the employee's annual salary shall be $82,400. Number 3, vacation. Employees shall be entitled to 4 weeks of paid vacation leave in 2021. And this, how does this change from what we've received
It's not
before?
a 3-year.
The previous one was for 3 years.
3 years with
Yes.
with the raises each year?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a proposal we're looking at now.
Mr. Chair, I guess I would respectfully object to taking action on that because that has not been submitted to the administrator's office on Wednesday, and it's not on the agenda. So I guess I would have a little bit of concern about voting on something that I haven't seen it and have not had the opportunity to review it. So I'm just concerned that we're talking about an amendment.
I'll be honest, I actually appreciate the change to 1 year with everything that's going on.
I think as
I
a
think that's a
budget,
fair play. Go ahead.
I think as a budget consideration, essentially, we amend the budget as proposed to us all the time. So we're in discussion about this. We could certainly discuss it today if we're going to go into executive session, or we could wait till next meeting and have an executive session, whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Yeah,
I don't feel comfortable going into executive session with 2 members on the phone. That doesn't seem appropriate.
Commissioner Kelly suggested we wait until next meeting, maybe we can get more people in present so that everyone can be included in the executive session. It's technically perhaps out of order to have an executive session by phone.
Yeah, and I don't believe this has been something that has had to be handled in executive.
I wouldn't, I mean, if the
Session.
whole
I
thing
mean-
has been read, and I wouldn't see any, and particularly when the next meeting is at 5:15 and you have your budget meeting immediately following that by 6 o'clock. You know, this
Can
isn't
be a late
exactly
night.
rocket science, so, you know.
The
Can I ask one question?
Say one more thing.
Commissioner,
I want to, like Commissioner Ames, I appreciate you amending this. It was gracious of you, and it just helps us move forward, you know, with things so uncertain right now as far as our budgets and all. I appreciate you taking the initiative on that.
I appreciate that as well.
Commissioner Ames, want to speak, and then Commissioner Madore.
I'm a straight shooter with you, Larry. If it was still a full 3-year, I probably would look at holding off. I'm pretty comfortable with this extension. It gets us through this. It gets you another year, so that at least you've got the security as well. So I honestly don't need to wait to talk about this in depth.
Commissioner Madore.
Well, I was going to ask why just 1 year? And personally, if we're going to have someone at the helm, you know, a commitment to the future is important. I'm not saying if this is, you know, the contract that you want to go for, then that's perfectly fine with me. But I just, it's 3-year contract is pretty typical. Sometimes there's a lot more to it. But if preferably, I think I would want a 3-year contract, not personally as if I was in your shoes, but being on the board and having you for 3 more years. That's what I think would be best for Androscoggin County. Whether things are uncertain or not, we still want a qualified person at the helm, and I would like it to be Mr. Post. But if 1 year is as far out as what you'd like to do, then so be it.
Came about as a result of a conversation where there was some concern expressed about, you know, where we are, you know, in these times and so on. This saves you $600 next year. And so that's what's important, like, you know, in essence, something agreed to.
I mean, whether the state gives us less money for the jail or not, we still need someone who's going to be in that seat. And I know all of us don't have the perspective of what it was like before we had an administrator, but it's not a seat that we want to leave empty. I think I felt comfortable being on this board, knowing that Mr. Post is our administrator, and I think looking toward the future is important. I know, at least for the work I do in government, that's something that's on my mind a lot. If I was doing a 1-year game, you know, clearly this is a different situation, but if my perspective was I was be there for 1 year, I would probably operate a bit differently than I would be if I was looking out for a long game. So preferably, I would like to make it 3 years if Mr. Post would be willing, but doesn't sound like the board is particularly interested in that.
Yeah, my concern wasn't the duration. I definitely want to hear
Correct.
3 years. It had more to do with, in the next couple of years, we don't know what kind of increase we're going to be giving to countywide, because we just don't know. We don't know what the financial future looks like for Androscoggin County. And so in order to keep things consistent with him and department heads, you know, just taking this uncertain time 1 year at a time has nothing to do with the duration that I want you to stay, just, you know, taking this all one step at a time and getting through it. And I'm hoping by the end of next year, we can say with confidence, 3 years it is, you know, and, but yeah, it has nothing, I guess I want to make that clear, it has nothing to do with duration. It was pretty obvious when the auditors were here that you are worth every penny we pay for you. I mean, when the auditors were talking, everybody, I hope everybody understood, you know, it's you that brought about most of those changes. And then more recently, Clarice with the record keeping and the actual bookkeeping and the recording has brought about great changes. But when he talked about, you know, being in our financial state right now, that's all you. And you've earned every cent of any raise we would give you just because of what you've done for the county financially. And then the intangibles of putting us in a position, a better position with the towns and a better position with the budget committee. You know, I know you've been the driving engine of that. And so this has nothing to do with, I'm only confirming I want you to stay 1 year. I want you to stay indefinitely. It's just waiting till next year to see what our financial picture looks like for all of our department heads and for you as the leader, and what we should, what's fair to do for you at that point.
Question.
Question from Commissioner Ames?
That new salary, that's not a pay cut for you, is it?
No, it's 3% increase.
Okay.
I mean,
You said save six, last thing I want to do is cut any of your pay.
No, it's
Okay.
an increase, but
Okay.
So it's
Nope,
commensurate
I'm good with that.
you know,
That's fine.
what we've, you know, done across the board for, you know, the other departments as a whole.
Further discussion?
I will tell you that Sally, you'd be aware of who it is, in 2015, told the Board of Commissioners that in order to get an administrator, they'd have to pay significantly more than I'm making right now. And that was 5 years ago.
I'd be curious, do we have a way to see what's an average pay for the position?
I have it in 2018.
Could I see that when you get a chance?
Sure.
I assume you don't obviously have it right this second.
Right.
Thank you.
Maybe you could send it to all of us.
Last thing I want to do is severely shortchange you.
It's-
Yeah, again, it's 2 years old. But,
You know, in terms of comparables, $82,000 is a town manager's salary for a fairly, you know, mid to small town. Some of them, like Casco, it's in the high 80s. So it's I don't know how it compares to county administrators, but it's fairly comparable to municipalities, I would say.
So what's the pleasure of the board on this item? Commissioner?
Sorry, just looking for clarification. So I could have sworn I saw it on the budget. Could Chair correct me if it was in the budget that was sent out? Or sorry, the agenda? Sorry.
Yes, it is on the agenda.
Okay. Now who put, now has the chair and the administrator had conversations about this before today's meeting?
Just today that the administrator was going to come up with a different number.
So, okay. So you guys have talked about this?
Today we did. So maybe this needs to go on the agenda, I don't know.
No, I'm not concerned about that. I'm just trying to understand the context of it. And you know, how it was drawn up in that perspective, because, you know, as I've expressed, I would prefer to see something, you know, longer term. So that's why. And, you know, I'm not sure if that was brought to the board. You know, I wonder if the board would have been supportive of that, of a longer term contract like the one that we had received the one that I inherited when I joined. It was that 3-year thing. Say we had a relatively positive evaluation. That's partly why I've said that I think it should be longer.
We could put 2 items on the agenda next week.
Well, that's only as much as Larry's willing to, if he's looking to retire in say a year, then wouldn't really make any sense. But if he wants to stay with us for 3 years, then maybe it would be a good direction to go.
The
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner,
I'd
Go ahead.
like to make a motion to add this to the agenda today. It does require a unanimous vote. This amendment that's been proposed, I do object to this being submitted so late, but I would like to add this to the agenda.
add this to today's agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This amended contract.
Manager's contract was on the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
The
It's our-
manager's
it's our
contract
last item.
was on the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I recognize that, but I am trying to pull up the amended contract via email. Remotely, and I'm having difficulty with pulling it up.
That's because I just passed the new one out.
Yeah, that just got passed out. We can table the actual vote on this till next meeting, and if we think there's some interest in going a 3-year contract for the board, we can also have that available to be debated next meeting as well. And then
I
go
guess
over
I'd like to see a vote on this amendment today, if possible. Since there was such a desire to actually do it, I think we should go forward with it at this point.
are there any objections of the board to add this item to the agenda for today? Well, Commissioner Larry is saying that this language wasn't set out to him, so on and so forth. He wants to go by the rules as he sees them on have a unanimous consent. Unanimous.
No. It's the agenda item, not the particular.
Right. And we amend votes all the
Yeah,
time.
the board seems to be of the opinion that the agenda item is what would need to be added. The agenda item is already there, and that we amend budget matters all the time. And the changes are quite simple, so we could go with that. There seems to be no interest in having unanimous consent to change the agenda.
So just to clarify, Mr. Chair, could you please just read the proposed amendment so that I'm just so I'm on the right page? I just want to
Yeah.
make sure I know what I'm voting for or voting against.
Yes, it extends it for 1 year, and the language that is extended is commencing January 1st, 2021, the employee's annual salary shall be $82,400, and that's a 3% increase. And it also says employees shall be entitled to 4 weeks of paid vacation leave in 2021. I don't know what the current, I don't know what the previous proposal was, but
It was 4
It was
this
4.
year, then 5 for the following.
the previous proposal had 4 proposed for this year and then additional ones for following years. And this particular salary of an increase of 3% winds up being a reduction of the original proposal for this year of $600. So it's roughly the same.
Yep.
Salary rates in future years will be debated based on the merits at that time.
And vacation will be increased by 1 week because the current is 3 weeks paid vacation, by my understanding, looking at the old
Is it
agreement
That's-
signed in January 2018.
That's correct.
I guess I'd be willing to accept that, but I feel that we should keep it at 3 weeks vacation at this point and go with 82,400. I'd like to propose that as a motion.
So Commissioner Larry proposes that we strike the 4 weeks in section 3 vacation and replace that with 3 weeks. Do we have a second for that? Appears to be no second for that.
And I make a motion for 82,400 or to accept the proposal as the amended proposal as read to me. And under
82,400.
the current agreement terms.
Moved by Commissioner Larry to accept the proposal as written, actually, with the 82,400 salary for 1 more year for the administrator.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Kelly. Further discussion?
I'd like to have more
Just to
discussion.
clarify, that is continuing the old agreement, Mr. Post and Mr. Chair, is that correct?
The provisions of the agreement, other than the monetary numbers, is all the same. That would be correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ames?
I really want to see an average number before I vote on either. I'm torn.
Okay, we can accept the tabling motion and then see how that goes.
I-
The Commissioner
Yeah,
Ames says
just
he'd like to see the average.
I'm
Amount
just
of,
wondering what you mean by that. I'm not against that.
I'd like, I want to see the average to see where his numbers actually were for the 3-year mark. I'd like to see the
Oh, for
averages.
what other what
Correct.
other administrators?
Correct.
Okay, that's a reasonable request. That would actually be a telling request, I think.
Yeah, I think I can get quite a bit out of that.
Yeah.
I say, you know, I just want to,
Commissioner Maduro has the floor now.
I think, you know, when if we do an average and look at the number, you know, we do have to weigh that the other counties, some of them are quite a bit different than ours. And they're much either bigger or smaller outfits. And some don't really have them at all. And
I
some,
understand that.
and some are really, to some extent, more like an administrative assistant gig versus sort of a manager. I know we call Larry the administrator, but really he's the manager. Very distinctly different roles. So
I think though what you're gonna find is
I
like
think-
our other positions that we are on the lower end.
That's my worry.
If you know, the average number is far less than, you know, what we're offering,
You know, you're gonna find it more.
that's what I
think
mean.
it's gonna be a lot more,
Yeah,
I would think so too.
which
That Larry's making less
makes me
than
feel
what.
like
That's what I'm
an
saying.
ass holding
That's what I'm
off.
saying. If that number is, you know, great, we need to consider the, you know, the fairness of that, I guess.
I moved to table.
Been
Second.
moved and seconded to table this item till next meeting, pending acceptance of the report. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that's Commissioner Roy, is that an aye?
Yes.
And Commissioner Larry, did you vote to table?
Aye.
Yeah.
I vote no.
Vote no to table. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The matter is tabled by a vote of 5-2.
Would you be,
Me?
yeah, would the numbers from 2 years ago that he already has, or do you want him to start calling all the counties?
I'd love a more accurate if you could.
All right, that's your.
I won't hold you to that. I know that's a task.
Item number 9, discussion items. Are there any discussion items for the commission?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Larry?
I have concerns with, because basically we only received the amended, or the employment extension change on Friday, but that doesn't really give the commissioners time from Friday to this meeting to consider changes of the agreements that they may feel are prudent. So I'm glad that it's been tabled, but I would like to see this agreement looked over as well by the commission and possible changes proposed before we take a vote on the next meeting. And I'm also concerned on the timing. We were told that we had, or it was said that we didn't have anything worth talking about for the July meeting. And now we're going to be needing to rush through this for budget committee and other meetings at 6 coming up in this next meeting. So I have some great concerns about the timing on this, and I think that's not appropriate.
Thank you, Commissioner Larry, and you can bring proposals to the next meeting that we can all address and consider.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and it's not a criticism of the chair, just to clarify.
Any more discussion items? Commissioner Maduro?
I just want one proposal brought by the chair. That's personally what I want. I want one proposal brought by the chair that Mr. Post and you have talked about, weigh the options and bring it forward to us. I don't want to talk about changing whether it's 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I really want the chair and the administrator to come to some agreement about, and then, take it from there. Personally, I don't really want it to dive into the details of the contract and change it. I mean, clearly this is really about an extension and money and vacation, and not about, the details of the contract. So the bare minimum, I think the 3 bullets here is all I want to talk about, and nothing about the details of the contract, unless, the administrator wants to change it.
The chair will get together with the administrator, will come forward with one proposal. Keep in mind, at the meeting itself, the proposal can be amended, but we'll bring these things as clear as we can to begin with. Further discussion items?
Mr. Chair, I understand that sentiment, but Commissioner Madore, I believe, said that there's, where it was discussed earlier about there's no real bully pulpit by the chair, et cetera, and I'm not speaking of you, Mr. Chair, but the position. But this would actually, in effect, make that where the, I guess it begs the question, this has been in my mind for about 3.5 years, are we commissioners or not, and do we have the authority to actually make changes, or are we always at the mercy of a select few making the decisions, and then it's up or down vote, we have to move quickly, we don't have time, et cetera, when we skip meetings. So I really object to that push or request that you as the chair would be the only one to really discuss this, and then we would have to start, because if you did that, Mr. Chair, that proposal would then come out Friday at 3 or 4 p.m. We would then have, from then on, the time to come up with changes. So we, as commissioners, are not able to serve our constituents to our full abilities because we are told, no, we have to work with a proposal that's given. We're not allowed to bring a separate proposal. We serve the county constituents. That is our role. We are the overseers. That's not just me speaking it, that's other people. So I feel that it's inappropriate to say that it would just be the chair to meet with the administrator to decide what the proposal will be, and then we have to react on Friday. With all due respect, Mr. Chair, it's not an issue of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. The chair intends to assist the commission in coming up with a proposal that the administrator also feels good with, and the chair feels that'll be a good start, and believes that the board agrees with that, and Commissioner Madore was the original person suggesting that. If the board feels otherwise, the chair can behave otherwise. But we'll start with that, and like I said, the chair has no intention of limiting any debate on any other amendment or proposal regarding the commissioner's continued participation here. Further discussion items? If not, we'll move on to number 10, future agenda items. Are there any future agenda items? Not, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Commissioner Kelly moved and Commissioner Christner seconds, a motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Commissioner Larry?
Thank you.
The motion to adjourn carries 6-1. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.